Hello all. In this video I have a nice little bunch of marking layout tools to show you, all kindly sent to me by Banggood for the purposes of review. First we'll look at this very wallet friendly aluminium T-type marking gauge. I didn't have much luck with the first aluminium one I tried, so it'll be interesting to see if this one fares any better. This one features, or can feature I should say, a micro adjust and a caliper function. Next is Hongdui HD26 ruler. It struck me as a bit of an odd addition to Hongdui's incredible lineup of tools, but regardless, this ruler again features a caliper function for outside measurements. Could this and the T-type gauge be an ideal bench or desktop pairing? Finally, we'll have a good old gander at this incredible looking marking gauge from Hongdui, the HD27. As we've come to expect from most of their tools, a real thing of beauty. Made from aluminium and steel, the business end is able to take a pencil, but it also comes with quite a clever knife set. Before we get started, I just want to show you the packaging. So all three arrived in a box together. The Hongdui marking gauge in its own box with cut foam, much as you'd expect. The ruler too, though not in bespoke packaging like the gauge, at least comes shipped in a case. However, the T-type gauge comes in a plastic bag inside a jiffy bag. Ordered on its own, this could be at risk of damage in transit. It is a budget tool, but even so, I thought that worth mentioning, I think. So let's kick off with the T-type gauge then. Here's my collection of T-types, and if you saw my original reviews or have watched any of my build videos, you'll know I'm a convert. I swear by them and use them all the time. At least these high quality steel ones I do anyway. I have a 250 and a 500mm one, both with micro adjust and vernier scales. They're just incredible for layout. They're not cheap, nor are they any longer available on Banggood, but if you search for steel T-type marking gauge, you'll find them. You can though find these aluminium T-type gauges on Banggood and for under a tenner. These are called multi-gauges as you can use both sides of the rule to make it like a combi square, but in my review of this tool, same video as I reviewed the steel ones, I found the aluminium multi-gauge didn't zero properly, leading to me to have to make a jig to cut some of the T-head away to make sure it's zeroed to the stock. As such, it, unlike the steel ones, was not a tool I recommended in the video. Whether that issue is sorted for these, I don't know. I am though ecstatic to report that this new one does indeed zero properly with the T-type head seated perfectly flush with the stock. It has freedom scale on one side, metric the other, and I personally find the white on black very easy to read, even with my poor eyes. The scale on the head reads left to right, or 0 to 90mm, and only in millimetres. The multi-gauge too has left to right scale on the head. The steel T-types, however, have a centre scale, so 0 in the middle. This centre scale I found extremely useful in daily use. It seems to suit the way you use this head type. Admittedly, that's a pretty minor gripe. The main thing with these is how easy they make line marking, and set to 20mm, this budget one perfectly matches the overlaid line from the steel one with both set at 20mm. As mentioned, I have the bells and whistles version of this tool featuring micro adjust and inside measuring calipers. You can buy versions with or without either of those. In a couple of tests alongside my usual verniers, they read the same, like on this mortise at a fraction under 13mm. Here I have the combi square from my beautiful Oxford set, basically a more and right set for £30 less. Set to 20mm, the thing with marking with these is firstly the imbalance, having to swap the stock around at each end of a piece. Secondly, inevitably you'll have to mark with the slot in the rule face down, which, without exception, the end of your pencil will disappear into at some point. So although these are a standard for marking out, they do make marking a bit of a chore. Further, they always seem to be calibrated so if you have your scale line up against the stock, the 20mm line in this case, your pencil mark will be about 1mm over, and my old Starrett does the same. You have to cover the line with the stock to get an accurate pencil mark, but then you're never quite sure how much you've covered the scale mark or line. These T-types are calibrated so you're exactly on the measurement it says you are. When you're line marking, the T-shaped head just makes for perfect, smooth, even lines. What more can you say? Okay, so the micro adjust. While I think it's a nice to have, and with even this bells and whistles version costing under £10, then why not? The micro adjust I think has limited use on this tool. It works fine for creeping up on a mark or in between two, but it doesn't have a vernier scale. The steel ones, if spec'd with the micro adjust option, have verniers, as does the multi-gauge, which is comparable price to the new T-type. Plenty of room to have one laser etched on the stock, so a real shame they didn't. Overall though, I'm happy to recommend this. If you've not not used a T-type gauge before, this could be a great one to try out that won't break the bank. I'm sure, like me, it will make you a convert. As mentioned at the start though, do consider the way it's packaged. Maybe pick one up with something else so they're packaged together. Also be mindful if ordering which version you're ordering. They go from basic T-type to one with either caliper or micro adjust, or, like mine, with both together. I've had it almost permanently on the bench this last week, and much as I thought I wouldn't, I found the caliper edition really handy. All in all, a great benchtop companion. As has been this Hongdui HD26 ruler. It appears that as yet it's only available in metric and 150mm length. There's not actually that much to say about it. It has, as you can see, the 150mm scale on one side, again easy to read white on black. Whether the scale being on one side will be an issue if you're southpaw, I couldn't say. You can see at the end there it has a steel pointer, the use for which we'll see in a minute. The rest is solid aluminium, finished nicely as you would expect from Hongdui. In terms of rules, generally at the desk or at the workbench I use a variety of lengths of steel rules like this. I was amused at first at how the Hongdui having a raised section and thumb screw, making it easy to pick up, was sold as a feature, but it is, and quite obviously so. Tapering quite sharply to an edge, it does its ruler thing well, not standing the pencil off like some chunky alley rules can, and the scale being clear makes point marking easy enough. Undo the thumb screw and two rule halves slide apart, revealing a caliper for outside measuring. It too corresponded accurately to the reading from my usual calipers, although they, having a vernier scale, gave a little more detail, but essentially both reading 47mm. I was a bit sceptical, basically ordering it for no other reason than it was a new Hongdui offering, but like the T-type we've just seen, has been really nice to have around on the bench this last week. A convenient size too, a bit chunky for a trouser pocket maybe, but ideal for an overall. I can imagine it's ideally suited for a desk as well. Its caliper function has been genuinely handy. I've been prototyping pieces for a new chair, as well as making a new router accessory. Video on that out next week. Both this ruler and the T-type have partnered really well to this end. Getting either or, the T-type or this rule, is one thing, but I honestly think if you bought the pair as companion tools, you'd be pleased with them. They're a sort of 4 for 2. The Hongdui ruler does carry a premium over the T-type, feels a bit more like it in the hand too, and sells currently for just over £25. I think its RRP is more like £35. But again, I was quite surprised to have grown to like this over my initial WTF first impression of it. A tool I would not be surprised to like is another new offering from Hongdui, the HD27 Marking gauge. I love a marking gauge. I mean, I do an awful lot of marking and layout, so why wouldn't I? But they needn't be that complicated really. And then Hongdui rock up with this absolute weapon. Needlessly but beautifully over-engineered. If you've got a birthday coming up, drop that someone who loves you a cheeky little link to this. Not content with the simple machined aluminium face, Hongdui offer up a mirror polished steel one. It adds some weight to the thing too. On top, a thumb screw loosens the gauge with another easy to read white on black scale. Scale goes to about 135mm, but only around 110 is usable. You can flip over the gauge arm for a more freedom loving scale, giving around 5 or 5.5 freedoms. Flipped over, you can not only see the other scale underneath, but also another thumb screw. Loosen this, and it frees up a retractable tool rest. This, like the main tool body, is an aluminium, but anodised in that kind of subtle peach metallic like the handle on their mitre gauge. And what a lovely thing that is. At the business end, praise be, it's just a universal holder, not some specialised or proprietary thing. It'll hold a pencil, pen, or indeed its supplied knives. The holder for them at first had me scratching my head, as the blade freely rotates in it. If I unscrew this, what seems like an obnoxiously long thread, you can see the screw has a magnet in the end. This keeps the knives in place, and as you screw or unscrew, raises and lowers the knife height for finer adjustment. Can you make out what looks like a bearing in the end of the holder there? What madness is this? I do really love the simple thumb screw clamp though. So I actually bothered to dig out a macro lens to show you how tiny the second knife is. It might even be less than 1mm. If you're thinking, how would I ever line that up? Well, we'll get to that. The way the sliding mechanism on this is, and how the scale is indicated, this might be the first marking gauge where a scale is actually usable. Alright, watch this. Can you see the blade is backwards facing the wrong way there? Well, that's why it spins so freely. That perhaps brought me more joy than it should have. Of course, the internet will be watching going, yeah, well, obviously, but I've not seen a gauge do that before. There it is again, good innit? As you drag it along, the blade automatically turns the right way. There's something else pretty cool about how this is calibrated too. So the line I scored was set to 30mm on the scale. It looks slightly exaggerated from this camera angle, but the back of the score line tucks right up to the 30mm scale line on the tape. I'm hoping that was intentional, because if so, that's perfect. It's sort of hard to explain, but if you set a marking tool to say 30mm, then score with a knife, the outside of your knife mark will actually be over 30mm, making a tenon shoulder or whatever more like 30.5 or 31mm. When you know your tools, you get used to this, knocking it back to say 29.5 for a 30mm shoulder. With this Hongdui though, you don't need to think about it. 30mm on the scale will give you a 30mm shoulder if you chisel or cut to the score line. I did this a few more times to check it wasn't a setting fluke, but no, it seems to be a feature, and a good one at that. I set the gauge to 40mm to do another knife line, this time using the tool's rest feature. With the rest, it's beautifully smooth and easy to use, and gives a much cleaner, more consistent line. This undoubtedly due to you not weighting the knife. That is very nice indeed, even on MDF, which usually can't wait to fur up. When using the knife and the tool rest feature, you might want to test on some scrap first to dial in the perfect blade height using the thumb screw on the holder. Once you're set though, the rest is a great feature combination, making scoring on narrow stock just that bit easier and more comfortable. With a pencil installed, I set the gauge to 40 and then 30mm to check consistency over the knife lines. It was dead on, no wandering, just a steady, even line overlaying the scores already there. Here's a selection of some of my other gauges. This one, actually now marketed as Hongdui, but with a pencil holder similar to the one we've been looking at, is a nice pencil holding gauge to use thanks to its guide rollers. Designed to cope with straight edges as well as round or curved ones, its scale I found useless, especially on curves, as 0 is effectively a fraction behind the rollers depending on the radius of your curves. It's just hard to accurately gauge 0 due to the rollers. For best results it needs setting to an existing mark really. Here is a classical wheel type gauge, perfectly functional and not one you could accuse of being over-engineered. This particular one has a blade type where the edge is centre of the wheel. Avoid these. They can't be sharpened or re-edged, at least not very easily, and as they nearly always are, scale being useless either due to rolling around as you're trying to set or just not accurate, are not exactly intuitive tools. As an example of what I mean, you might be able to see this dual marker has blades where the edge is out facing, its fixing screw countersunk. This means regardless of its own scale accuracy, it can be set against existing stock or against another tool with a trustworthy scale. And of course, those blade types can be re-edged nice and easily. On the Hongdui HD27 though, the extendable gauge isn't a round bar, so doesn't roll around as you're trying to set. It works via a clear cursor mark on the body, meaning the scale can be accurately matched and is reliable. Also, with its simple holder, able to take a pencil, or its blades, the wheel worries are no longer worries. Their knives seem to score easier than even a tuned wheel too, meaning when you have a large number of components to mark out, it'll save a bit of hand fatigue. As for caring for these supplied knives, well, a few licks now and again with a small Nagura stone and you'll be right. I'm impressed by how, in a saturated market for gauges, Hongdui have come out with a gauge that is beautiful, very well built and machined, and functionally right on the money. I look forward to using this a lot more. With their usual RRP being somewhere around £60, these at time of writing are on Banggood for £52. Not cheap, but for the tool it is, I find it remarkable that it isn't double that. All in all then, this has been quite a satisfactory haul. A nice budget introduction to the world of T-type gauges, a smart looking ruler that, whilst it'd be hard to rave about, is equally hard to fault as it ends up in frequent use, and finally a marking gauge that is just out there, looking all distinguished, doing what it's supposed to. With this lot, I did also order a router bit. I'm still trying hard to get to work. Trying so hard that it's meant I've had to build a router adapter for it. Videos on the router adapter I made coming next week, and hopefully, because I actually want it to work, a successful video on the router bit the week following. You'll find all the appropriate links to these tools in the description below. I'll link where possible some of the others I featured for comparison as well. Comments and questions welcome below, or just type freedom scale for the algorithm. Please hit like if you did, sub if you aren't already, and as ever, if you made it this far, thanks for watching.